Hello, friends. Welcome to our Power is Within podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine, and my mission for this podcast is to inspire you to take your power back and to realize that you are the healer that you've been looking for all along. Healing is possible in mind, body, and soul. Our challenge this week is inspired by this week's episode. It's all about pleasure time. And when I say pleasure, I am referring to any pleasure. What brings you joy? What lights you up? What is something that you can do for you that you are in such bliss that you get lost in time and space doing it? How often do you set a time aside for your pleasure and joy? Do you prioritize it, or is it squeezed in as the leftover time after everything else is checked off the list? How about this week we practice making ourselves a priority? Schedule in time that you can follow your bliss and be in your joy. Maybe it's doing something that you've done before, and maybe exploring something new. All I know is do you. Our guest today is Andreja Bourke. Andrea is the founder of the Tantra Queen Method, and she is with us today to talk about so many wonderful things that are valuable to our healing journey, including a big one, which is pleasure. And when I say pleasure, I mean all pleasure. Yes, sexual, but not just sexual pleasure, but pleasure as a whole and our ability to feel worthy of pleasure in our lives. To the men out there, if you are tuning in, it might feel at moments like this pertains to only females, but I promise you that she speaks to men also through this episode. And if you are already finding yourself in resistance to this topic, then I say just stick with it and listen with an open mind. You might notice that there are moments that you can even hear the discomfort in my voice, as this is definitely a topic that is not my strong suit. And it is a very big area of growth for me personally, which is why I had such a great time chatting with Andreja, because I just feel like I really learned so much from her today, and she really expanded my mind, and that's what I love. I love expanding my mind and just being open to new possibilities and new ways of interpreting and seeing things and connecting dots and just all possibility. I love questioning it all, and she just provides a lot of insight for all of us today. So I look forward to you also having the opportunity to learn. And with that, I will welcome her to the show. Andrea, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm so excited to get to chat with you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Yay! All right. Well, I know that one of my besties speaks so highly of you and just adores you. And so as I was explaining to her how important it was for me and what my mission on my podcast was, she was like, okay, you have to have Andrea on your podcast because she's amazing.
Gosh, that is just such an honor. And I love that this information is getting passed around, because when we share our secrets in sisterhood, we all get to strengthen together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And so, like, what I would really like to do, actually, I know we were just talking a little bit offline, and I read your bio on your website, and I felt like I was relating to a lot of what you were saying in it. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's like the story of so much of my life. And so I imagine there's going to be other people out there who also have that feeling as well. And I would love for you, if you're open to just sharing a little bit about your story. I mean, talk about maybe some of the things that you've gone through that really led you into doing the work that you're doing today. And maybe you can even start with what you're doing so people know that much.
Absolutely. Well, I am a tantric sex and intimacy coach with a strong background in holistic health. And what that really means is a lifelong quest of learning how your body can become your own unique medicine. I grew up as a child. I was obese, so I struggled with my weight and learning how to take care of my body from a young age. And that was really something that catapulted me into this lifelong journey of healing and learning how to really take care of myself. Fast forward many years later and trying to find a way in a professional life, I went through investigation of what might feel good. However, with the social construct and pressures, I went through a lot of jobs and careers of trying to look good on paper. And I felt really empty inside. And through that emptiness, I was also struggling to have satisfying, intimate relationships and sexual encounters. I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have what information on how to create the kind of connections I deeply yearned for. I might have like a few sexually satisfying experiences, but it didn't feel as spiritual or as healing as I wanted. But I didn't even know that I wanted that at the time. So after working a bunch of different jobs, I had a background working at a hedge fund as an in-house CFO, and I was just miserable. I felt so disconnected from my soul and who I wanted to be as a human. And I moved back home to Montana, where I ended up going to Burning Man that summer. And at Burning Man, I discovered Tantra. And I met Layla Martin, who ended up being my mentor and coach. And I completed her program in 2017. When I discovered Tantra, I felt like it was the missing piece for me. It was information and education around the intersect of sex, spirit, soul, and healing. And I knew I was no longer available for sexual encounters and experiences that left me feeling empty after or left me feeling disempowered. And I wanted to know what my body was really capable of and how to heal past traumas, sexual assault, eating disorders, all the times hours I spent hating my body, hating myself. I wanted to find resolution in that and a new way to treat myself and a new way to take care of myself. And Tantra really was the portal that opened all that up for me.
You briefly explained, like it gave Tantra is info education around the intersect of sex, spirit, soul, and healing. Can we expand on that a little bit more so that anyone who's listening has a deeper understanding of what that means?
Sure. So just as a little bit of a history, Tantra is a series of ancient scripts, like the Bible or the Quran, right? And it comes back from 500 BC out of India, Nepal, and Tibet. And within these ancient scripts are mantras, meditations, movement practice, like yoga as an example, of how to channel and connect with the different energy bodies that are inside of us to cultivate and create a connection of your sacredness, your oneness, or your enlightenment to your sexuality. So, what that might look like in a practice would be learning how to use your breath while you self pleasure to regulate your nervous system in a way that will allow you to surrender and receive amplified pleasure.
Okay. Wow. I had no idea it was actually like an ancient script. That's so wild.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be looked at like a religion.
Okay. Yeah. I wonder how many people like kind of don't understand what it was. Cause I mean, I'm like, this is new to me, like very new to me. So this is going to be really fun chat for sure.
And just to clarify, there's like different kinds. There's like ancient tantra, and then there's like new age tantra. Just like anything that's really old goes through transformations and gets redone as time goes on, so to speak.
Right, that makes sense. So you go to Burning Man, you discover Tantra, and you have this like innate understanding or wisdom that says, this is for me, this is what I need. And you start studying this and learning this. You have a mentor. In what ways has this positively shifted your life? Like, what, after all those struggles and the traumas and the things you suffered and, like you said, the insecurities and all that, like, in what ways did the understanding of this ancient practice support you?
Hmm. It really provided me the sanctity in my own pleasure. Like, it gave me a structure of how to protect my peace around my pussy, basically. It allowed me to be like, I'm no longer available for like toxic relationships or people. I promote my pleasure. I ask for what I want in the bedroom. I communicate more strongly even in my day-to-day life because I feel more connected to myself and my pleasure. It really gave me a new sense of feeling self-assured and feeling more in my body. And because I was having more positive feedback to myself with myself, it provided me a foundation to go after more dreams, to go after more desires, to really ask for more of what I wanted out of my life.
So it's not about just, we're not just talking about like sexual pleasure here. We're not just talking about what you want from a sexual standpoint or in the bedroom. You're talking about like everything in life, far
Yes,
superseding one aspect.
absolutely.
And in general, why do you believe, for people in general, why is pleasure so important, this concept of pleasure?
I'm really letting that question sink in because I think you just hit such a powerful point. I think it provides us with information around what we're capable of, what our ability behind our life force is to expand and be able to have this much pleasure is really a life altering experience.
When we speak about pleasure from a purely like sexual standpoint, why
Mm-hmm.
why is why is that so important? If there's anybody who's listening who's thinking, okay, but like that doesn't really matter, or that's not important, because maybe there's people who are just really disconnected from that sexual pleasure or what is possible or what we are capable of experiencing. Maybe they didn't place and don't place or have value in that. How can you explain the importance and value of sexual pleasure to somebody who maybe hasn't up to this moment valued that or saw an importance in it?
Yeah, like my first response is like, why would we be gifted these beautiful sensual centers? So for the woman, the clitoris, and for the man, the tip of the penis, having thousands and thousands of nerve endings in these places that are purely created for pleasure. Why would we have these if we weren't meant to explore and feel this much pleasure? And the importance of it is to really know yourself on the most intimate and deepest level. You're passing over an opportunity to really know who you are if you fail to investigate these deep, 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 deep levels of pleasure.
What advice would you give to someone then today if they've never explored this, if they don't even know where to begin, if they're like really uncomfortable with this idea of like, what if somebody out there's being triggered by the word pussy, or triggered when they think of like, oh, self pleasure, like that just sounds so foreign to me, you know? What
Mm-hmm.
advice could you give to somebody?
Absolutely. And look, I'm like on the other side of the pendulum, but I had to start somewhere too. And so I also just want to normalize that we all have to start at the beginning. And I would say the first step would be to find yourself in a well lit place or set up a lot of candles, grab a mirror, and get down and get in there and look at either whatever your central center is that you're working with. Get some oil out that is friendly for you. So, coconut oil is what I always recommend, but if there's an allergy, if that doesn't work for you, trying a different oil. Um, and just touching and looking and investigating and seeing and witnessing that body piece.
If that feels uncomfortable and somebody has a lot of shame or guilt around this topic, because it's a rather taboo topic, and there are a lot of people that have maybe been conditioned or taught that this was bad or not okay. You know, there's certain religions and just sometimes just parental upbringing. So a lot of people, especially women, can carry a lot of guilt or shame around this. Do you have any insights you could share with them?
Absolutely. I first want to just say that wherever someone is in their journey, it's perfect. There's no right place to start, and no one is wrong for feeling the ways that they feel in this experience. I welcome and invite folks out there to decide how they could get more intimate with this body piece of themselves that is expected to perform in all sorts of ways. As a female, we menstruate from a young age and we penetrate ourselves with tampons or other products to assist this process, or we get pregnant and we have babies. We have a lot of expectations around this body piece without getting to really know her. And so I offer the invitation of what might it feel like to open up a dialogue with this body piece, or to just invite people to explore through touch or sight what this body piece might feel like or be like if there was just more interaction. It doesn't have to look like self pleasuring. It doesn't have to be masturbation. It doesn't have to be any of that. It can literally just be viewing or talking to or just gently touching and just offering a space to be present with this body piece that has a lot of expectation to perform in so many ways.
Wow. That's like a really profound point you just made. And it's so true. And I have never even thought of it that way. Whew. All right.
It's really amazing, right? It's like this piece of us that we are with our whole life, right? And yet we can look at we shame a lot of it or act like a lot of it's a nuisance. Like we're like, we're bleeding again. This is so annoying. Or, just all the different things that we put ourselves through. But really, this is like a potential place of deep connection with ourself and pleasure for ourselves if we shifted our perspective.
Right. Yeah. And you make such a good point. I mean, that's another thing that often we're taught from such a young age, again, through society, through, you know, movies, through parenting, depending on how our parents' relationship was with their, menstruation, are not parents, but, mothers. um, but yeah, we look at it as this massive inconvenience, and something that I've been learning as I've been doing some healing work around some some illness that I've had is how often women actually end up, especially women who have like chronic pain or chronic illness, how often these symptoms tie into and around our menstruation, and how often though it's like then you start to like dive in and inquire into what is my relationship with my period, and do I see it as an inconvenience? Is it like something I dread? Is it something I am like, oh, this again? And I have all these, you know, I end up having, say, PMS or lots of menstrual symptoms that aren't a welcoming symptoms. You know, they're not great
Mm-hmm.
feelings. So then you have all this discomfort. So almost you have almost everything you experience then with that part of us is like uncomfortable, unpleasurable. And so we actually have this like almost unhealthy relationship. And what I've been learning is that a lot of this illness or sickness or pain that we experience around our cycle, if we actually could shift the script and actually begin to welcome our cycle and view it and experience it differently, what could shift around that and what could shift within the illness or the sickness or the pain?
1,000%. I have to tell you that shifting my moon, period, menstrual, whatever term works for everyone, into a time of celebration and an offering to myself to do whatever the fuck I want, which was either like if I want to eat, you know, a whole bar of chocolate every day, or if I want to like just watch Netflix from like for like 14 hours that day, or like anything that I want on the first day of my bleed is mine. End of story. And so then it became something I started to look forward to. Because it was like a time of being like, oh no, I've got plans. My plans being like my bed, Netflix, and chocolate. And really giving myself the space to lean into this time being something that was just for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've like learned that this is like a beautiful time for us as women to go inward and really be with self. And so honoring that versus sometimes going against what feels more natural, you know, and I've where you know, go do really intense activity and just like want to almost you avoid that opportunity to like really be with self and go inward by filling that space with like things that are not actually as natural or aligned with nature, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It is a really beautiful time to turn inward. A lot of people call it their moon cave. And I think that this is really just another, again, our unique medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each individual is so unique, and learning your own rhythm and cycle is what's going to benefit you the most. I am someone that gets very creative when I bleed. I also get very turned on. I have like a strong sexual appetite when I bleed. And so I know that about myself, whereas there's other times during the month where it's not like that, right? And so working with your own feminine flow really provides a platform for you to be like, oh, great, I've got that coming up. I'm really creative during that time. I'm going to do this. Or, ooh, during my ovulation, I am just so tired. So I'm going to make sure I plan an extra rest and maybe cancel some workouts or friend talks or whatever, right? And that can be flip flop for people. Everybody's flow is their own.
Right. And so this is where learning to tap in and understand our own flow and be more intimately connected to what is true for us and then supporting that comes into play.
Exactly.
That makes so much sense. So while we're kind of on this topic, before we kind of delve into some other areas, um, I have an idea that a large base of my listeners are on some level suffering from chronic pain or chronic illness. And they've been on their own journey of healing and figuring out what are the tools that I need to support my healing journey. And so I could see how, as they read the title or possibly the bio, there might be some resistance or thoughts like, okay, they're talking about like sexual pleasure or, things that like don't pertain to me right now. Like I want tools for healing, but I know and understand intuitively that it all impacts our healing. Our whole life is our medicine. So this, I do believe, is a really integral role, especially when you start talking about our sexual energy being deeply rooted in our creative energy centers. So could you speak to anyone who's listening that might feel like they don't understand how this could connect to their potential or power to heal from chronic pain or illness?
The body is composed of different systems. And that means there's the mental body, the physical body, the energetic, the spiritual, the sexual, right? And they all tie into each other. Oftentimes, when we are experiencing chronic pain and inflammation, it is because the nervous system is in overdrive. And that is the brain. That is your thoughts. That is your feelings. That is your emotions. When we hone in on our sensuality, it doesn't even have to be sex. Sensuality can look like touching your body, playing with your hair, holding your breasts, massaging your belly, being present with your body as a whole. When you take the time to do that, it helps support calming and regulating your nervous system, which will reduce pain and inflammation, because your brain is that control panel for every other piece of your body. So to do this in a way that feels really good, working with your sexuality, working with your sensuality, finding ways to erotically step into this area of learning about yourself will support and accelerate healing chronic pain and inflammation.
That is really great explanation. Thank you.
I was like, did I break that down good? Okay.
You did. And so ultimately it really does, it does play a role. It does matter. I mean, I know for myself, the reason I'm starting to expand my exploration for healing is because of exactly what you said. We are multifaceted systems: mental, physical, energetic, spiritual, sexual. And as I hone in and I know that I'm doing this deep work on certain aspects of self, right? Like I'm getting certain things in order and I feel like I've had a lot of growth in certain areas, but intuitively I know that there's still healing to be done and I know that there's something missing. And so I have to be willing to explore these other parts and these other systems and see where there's maybe a disconnect and see what potential I have not unlocked yet within my own being. And this resonates.
Yeah. And as you're saying that too, I'm like thinking about how to really break this down even further. And basically, another way to look at it too is often chronic anything is based in inflammation. The body gets inflamed when its systems aren't working correctly. And that often comes from a stress response. So the body goes through trauma, or which could look like a car wreck, or could look like loss of a baby or a death in the family, or right, trauma can play out in so many different ways. And the body goes to protect, right? Because the body's main goal is to survive, to stay alive. And so when it goes into the action of protect, and we hear these terms a lot, like fawn, freeze, or flight, right?
Right.
And fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And I think there's even another one too. But your body goes into that to respond, right? And as it holds that trauma response, if it's not re-regulated, if it's not addressed or what we call healed, it will stay in that activated state. And over time, that activated state will continue to expand in the body because trauma is held in the body's tissues. And then that means that you don't feel safe because you're in an activated trauma response, stress response. And if you don't feel safe, it's really hard to do anything.
That makes sense. I want to talk about this idea also of sexual energy and creative energy. I know it's been mentioned a couple times already. And I'd wonder if you could explain how the two are interrelated, especially when you're looking at like energy centers.
There's like so many directions I could take this.
Pick one and then we can pick another one afterwards.
Yeah, it's almost like to the point where I just have too many trainings because it's like, which direction should we go? But, okay. So one really beautiful way to look at this would be, and this will be for our womb body friends, right? Or even if you don't have your womb anymore, you have the womb energy, but you can look at that like the creatrix, right? Like womb-bodied humans literally have the ability to create life. And that kind of creative energy is stored in that womb area, which is why oftentimes if you have gut health issues, you could be struggling to feel creative because the womb and the gut are right next to each other energetically as well. And the central centers that are below that womb area, and this could be for either gender, is going to offer, that's your sacral, that's your root, and that's where you hold security and where you hold your ability to feel rooted or held in the world. And so when you're working on those energy bodies and you're feeling rooted and you're feeling grounded, that really that's like thinking of it like a tree, right? The tree's roots are grounded and they're growing within the earth. And that's what provides the rest of the tree to grow just as much outwardly up, extending the branches and growing the fruits because the roots are deep into the earth and they're held and they're nourished and provided for. So when we take care of these sexual centers, when we do the energy work, when we're clearing and cleaning and cultivating these parts of our body, we're able to expand and grow and branch out, so to speak.
Right. I've heard, and I'm not sure, you can maybe speak to it, that like if you're looking at things from like an energetic centered perspective, that when we aren't rooted or grounded in the lower energy centers, then it's hard to thrive in the upper centers. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to right now, is like, how do we thrive and connect to all the centers on the upper half of us if we lack that groundedness in the root?
Absolutely. It's the same with the body systems, right? Like if your brain, which is your nervous system, is struggling, if you're in trauma response, it's going to play out into the external body systems, which could look like a rash, like eczema. That's like one of the outer laying body systems. Or adrenal fatigue. That means like if you're experiencing adrenal fatigue, like you have a bunch of other body systems that came before that are struggling. And those are just symptoms playing out. And so when you're not feeling, again, the root, your bottom chakra if that's not anchored, you're not safe. So you can't really build on top. You can't build on top of that when you have a rocky foundation.
So it goes back to that safety.
It's all about safety because the body's main goal is to survive.
Right. And so, I mean, and here's the other thing. We're like humans. We're all having this human experience. We all, most people, I can't say all, but like most of us like thrive through connection, seek connection out and intimate connection. And within the realm of intimate connection, there's usually physical intimacy involved. And yeah, I know that like that can really be affected if you don't feel safe. Right. And then you end up with like couples and relationships where there's really a struggle sometimes because there's like almost a missing element within that dynamic. And maybe a lot of it has to do with some layers of healing that just needs to still be done. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, there's so many. Yes. There's so many reasons why a coupleship might be feeling disconnect, and the layers of this too. So I work with individuals and couples, and a lot of the themes are similar, even if the individuals are experiencing something specific, right? So let me just give some examples. A lot of times, one person in the coupleship might not feel good about their body, right? And that means they don't feel safe. And so it becomes really difficult to expose their full body or be vulnerable with their full body with their partner because of that insecurity or because of the way they feel. And then that ends up affecting the partner and the partner creating a bunch of stories about not feeling desired, not feeling wanted, not feeling received. And it creates all these dynamics of people not feeling desired by one another, wanted by one another, when really it's more about each individual being in their own head and creating narratives that aren't real, right?
Right. Absolutely. It's stories. Exactly.
Right.
Okay. I have a question. This is,
yes,
it's right on topic, but a little shifting just slightly because I'm super curious. As you're talking about like these themes, individuals and couples and the themes, here's a really common theme. Maybe you can speak to this. Why is it two parts? One part is, why is it so common that a theme is that when two people first meet and start dating, they seem to have a really healthy sex life and like they want to have sex a lot and sex is good, but then you hear about how they like get married and like down the road their sex life disappears and it's just not there anymore. And the second part to that is why often what you hear is it's the woman who, I don't know, she's losing her sex drive or losing an interest in it or what's actually happening, because it's usually what you hear is like the woman who withdraws essentially and doesn't want the same sex life that they used to have. And then the man's kind of confused, like, well, wait, we used to do this. And then therein comes all the stories.
I have to write this down because there's so many different points.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, it's great. It's so great. So this is so real. Yes, I'm so glad you brought this up. Okay, first off, why does the sex life change, right? We'll start with that one, then we'll go to the second one. So because we are not taught or educated on how to cultivate healthy sex lives. So of course it's easy to keep things fun and frisky in the beginning. However, if you don't value your pleasure going into it, it really wasn't about the pleasure piece to begin with. It was just about creating connection with the partner. So when you're dating someone, when you're starting to get into a relationship with someone, when you're thinking about this person might be my person, like you want that connection with them. And so sex becomes part of that connection. But if the pleasure piece wasn't a priority for you, then it's not going to sustain. So eventually it just isn't a priority because it never really was.
My gosh, that is huge. I mean, you're like, that's literally like, oh, well, we have connection, like, to maybe if it were the woman, because I understand that sometimes it's the man, but like if it were the women, then she's feeling connected in different ways. And so she doesn't need, like, have the same need for the sex because it wasn't about the pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And for the man, is it common then that they also just tend to, like, they are physical, so they tend to need or desire the physical connection to feel connected?
A lot of times, and this is a blanketed statement, so disclaimer, a lot of times men feel connection through sex,
Mm-hmm.
where women feel connection through intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two different things.
Right.
So like for a woman, they might feel connection through like you taking out the trash, or you saying nice things, or you doing something, going out of your way to make me feel valued. Whereas men, when they feel disconnected from their partner, a lot of the times they go to sex to feel that connection. But because then the woman is feeling undervalued in all the other ways where she feels intimacy, then she doesn't want to have the sex.
Right.
And it becomes this cat mouse game. And it's because we, number one, lack communication, especially around sex and intimacy. And number two, we never took the time to learn our own pleasure and our own body. And so we can't communicate. Even if we could communicate, we wouldn't know how to share what we're experiencing because that wasn't prioritized.
That makes so much sense. So ultimately, if we were to be more curious and seek out this pleasure potential and bring that into relationships, essentially this could really improve and help the quality of our relationships.
Absolutely. And the other thing is I think a lot of women just don't they're like, well, it's just not that worth it for me. Like I can reach over, grab my vibrator, get it in and out in a few minutes, and then I can get back to what I want to be doing, or like what I need to do, quote unquote, is what I hear from a lot of women. Like, I need to go do the laundry. I need to take the kids to school. I need to do this. I need to do that. Like I'm busy. I don't have the time. Right. And it's because they're not having like these mind-blowing, earth-shattering, epic encounters that are possible. Because when you're having those, you hire a nanny, you hire a housekeeper, you do whatever, you create the space on the calendar, you have the parents come get the kids or whatever to prioritize these encounters because they're so worth it.
Do you think that comes from not feeling worthy of it, like to even create or have this type of pleasure, like this, when a woman says I'm too busy or I have all these other things, do you feel like that the root of that is her not feeling worthy, or just not even realizing or knowing what's possible?
I think it's both. I mean, the worthiness wound is in all of us, and it's so deep. And oftentimes you have to scrape through many, many layers to realize it's a worthiness thing. Mm-hmm. So even if I tell you right now, like, yeah, it has everything to do with worthiness, it's going to take a lot of self-work for someone to connect with that.
Right. Because they're going to go, no, it's this. And you're going to be like, yeah, but what's underneath that? Okay, but what's underneath that? But what's underneath that? Exactly.
And so like, yes, you're right. And what I will say is that like, you wouldn't even know that that should be a worthiness thing, right? Unless you took the time to prioritize your pleasure, make room to prioritize what you know and you want and need in your life, and to give that to yourself. The layers there are just so many.
Right. Okay.
And the second piece is just like why, like, the people just don't know how to carve out the time and intention for building their relationship. I can promise you, like, I don't know what the statistic would be, but I would say like 90% of people spend 100 times more energy, effort, investment, and money on their wedding than they do their marriage, or on courting the person rather than the actual partnership.
Right. Yeah. Like the wedding's the most important day, but really it's just the beginning of every other most important day.
Right. And that planning goes on for weeks, months, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, $100,000, whatever. Like, you know, just all the energy that goes into something like that, hours and hours, weeks and weeks, months and months, but then their relationship is rocky. They're not having sex. They're on each other. They're agitating each other. They don't know what, they're not communicating. They aren't on the same page, but like, yeah, let's make sure that we have the right photographer.
Right. And let's just put a plug in there. If it's absolutely been proven statistically over and over again that the well-being and the health of your closest relationships absolutely impacts the well-being and health of you. It's
Absolutely.
like a huge indicator of whether or not you're going to be in good health is like the quality of your relationships.
Yes.
So they're very important to invest in. And if we want to talk about relationships and we go back to the most important relationship, which is the relationship with ourself, what you were saying about the money that people spend on a wedding but not invest in the actual relationship, I thought, well, it kind of is the same for ourselves, right? And this isn't to guilt or shame. Like we're all guilty of this. It's a struggle for me all the time, how easy it is to just, to do things sometimes that aren't really self-care or really investing in myself, but then sometimes to just do these activities that are like genuine acts of self-love are sometimes a struggle. It's easier to just lay on the couch and watch Netflix. And I'm not saying that that's never self-love. There are times, like how you said on your first day of your cycle, if you want to like lay on the couch and watch Netflix, that might be a courageous act of self-love to give yourself that space. Now, if we just sit around and watch TV all day, but say we don't have time for self-care, and we don't do these other loving things, well, I see that as being part of it, right? Like us learning how to explore these deeper layers of self is a form of self-care and self-love, just like maybe regulating our nervous system or going out and exercising our bodies and being in nature and, all the stuff, whatever's feels really loving and caring towards ourselves.
The thing is that, the biggest excuse I hear from people about not wanting to do the work is money. Mm-hmm. And it's hilarious because everyone I know is, you spend the money anyway. Like the money goes every month, no matter what.
Yeah.
And on your $5 to $10 daily coffee or your Target runs or the random shit we spend money on is wild. Mm-hmm. And why it's uncomfortable is because you realize that you have to get intimate with money or make some sacrifices or budget or do something to make a self-investment happen. And so like that's pre-work to the work. And a lot of times people don't even get through the pre-work to get to the work.
Right. Yeah. I used to run a gym and people would all the time be like, oh, it's too expensive. I can't afford it. And I would, instead of being like, okay, like, well, then we'll give you a discount. I'd be like, well, I'd love to sit down and work on your budget with you to see how we can make it affordable, because I know that you're going out and boozing on the weekends. And I know that you buy Starbucks for $5 or $6 a day every day. So it comes down to like what we value.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing though. It's like, it's not that you don't value it. You just don't even know that you're making that choice. Right. You don't even know that you're choosing what you do and don't value.
So it's really unconscious activity.
Right. Because all of these are acts of intimacy with self.
Mm-hmm. So is there, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like I've read somewhere that there's actually a correlation or a connection between our like kind of sexual sensual relationship within ourself and our relationship with money.
Again, going back to the root chakra, your sense of security and safety, that all is money, and that's exactly where your sex centers are too.
Mm-hmm. So they are intimately connected.
And if you're looking at the nervous system or chronic inflammation and stress, like if you feel completely insecure financially all the time, or you don't have a good relationship with money, you're going to feel in sickness. You're going to feel disease. You're going to feel because you don't feel safe. And again, the body is always trying to protect you and survive.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, something that I learned a long time ago and I realized I was doing was they say that you're always creating, whether it's by default or design, is the question. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've learned how many of us are creating our finances by default, like as we're just saying, unconsciously, without awareness. And it's when we can shift into creating by design that we get to make these choices, that we get to be empowered. And, just like we get to create our life by design if we choose and take our power back, and all of this, our relationships.
It's all so interconnected. I just wrapped up my last group program. It's called Queen's Drip. It's at the beginning of every year, and it's 5 months long. And it's a 5 month process of breaking this all down. So we like start working with the brain and the nervous system and mindset, right? Because your thoughts are powerful. And then the second month, we move into the body, learning about how to move the body, how to take care of the body, looking at water intake, or just like the very simple steps of like how the body works. And then month 3 is breath, because like we are also talking about the energy work, right? So your breath is your prana, is your life force, is your chi. And it's what your breath is what communicates between the nervous system and the body. Just like when you feel really activated and unsafe, you breathe differently than when you're really grounded and at rest, right? So
Right.
your breath is this big indicator of how you feel. The 4th month, we cover bliss. And so we stepped into pleasure practices, getting to know the body, getting to know the pleasure. And the last month was bank. And I broke it down for all the queens on what are you doing with your money? I took them through budgeting. I took them through looking at how to sit with their quote unquote debt. I taught them how to call their banks and credit cards and ask for lower APRs, or how to move money around, how to really make financial goals for themselves and set themselves up for the rest of the year. And then, 5 years, 10 years, 20, 30, how to invest, how to look at stocks. Like, this is all part of our pleasure in life, part of feeling empowered, and part of learning our own unique medicine is being like, I've got me, I know how to take care of me, and I know how to give myself the things I really want in this life.
And it just really comes down to, like, when I hear you say that, it's just like having real, like a real love for self, but also trusting in self, like really trusting me, like trusting that I got me.
And trust is built.
Right. It's, yeah. Yes. I learned the hard way not long ago, about 7 or 8 months ago now. I was having a conversation with a coach and I was like, yeah, no, I trust me. I don't trust the other person. And she was able to like really like help me see how really all that came back to was me not trusting me. She's like, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
help you see this. I'm going to help you see where you're still missing trust within your own self. And again, it wasn't for guilt or shame. It's just like awareness so that I can begin to see these blind spots and and then take steps to develop this trust, because I in that moment I was like, well, I want to trust me, and it's also fair that there's parts of me that didn't trust me based on my whole history. But like now I get to make a choice in what actions I take, and I wanted to earn that trust. Like for the first time in my life, I was like, my God, I want to earn her trust more than I've ever wanted anything, just like I want to love her. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was a really big eye opener.
Self trust is one of what I call my pillars that I teach, because it's so easy to destroy and can feel so difficult to cultivate, right? So, like, we do this all the time, especially as women. And I'm just saying that because I am a woman and I'm speaking from my own personal perspective. Where it's like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to get up and work out, or I'm going to start this new hobby, or I'm going to go do this thing. And then I don't do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we like tell ourselves that self promise and we break it, we break our self trust.
Mm-hmm.
And what that tells us over time is like, okay, I don't believe in myself. I don't feel confident in the promises I don't keep to myself. And then over time, it just breaks down to like, I don't love myself. I'm not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Right.
so building that self trust is so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, because like you said, when I can trust myself, then um it's more empowering, and I can navigate life easier because I trust me, it's like I'm at a place where I trust my body. I know when it has symptoms that I'm healing, and I trust that it's actually working for me and not against me and with me, and that there's a language to it, and the symptoms are a language that are just helping me see where I might be off course, or where there's an area that still needs supported, or what I'm not, maybe there's a blind spot I haven't noticed.
Exactly. Yes, yes, yes.
I wanted to ask you a couple other questions before we close up here, just because I know it's something that you mentioned to me, and that's around. So I know a lot of this focus has kind of been around the woman. I guess let's actually first ask if like what what are your thoughts in terms of like the pleasure and all this, and how does it relate to a man? Because we talked a lot about the woman and the womb energy and like the menstruation cycles and all that, but like where does all this information play out for the man?
Absolutely. Great question. So, if we look at the like pillars or the foundations, a lot of those are the same. So for men to cultivate and harness their sexual energy, they're going to feel more self-trust. They're going to feel more security. They're going to feel more confidence. They're going to feel more self-assured, which will catapult them into taking bigger risks and doing things in their life that will fulfill bigger dreams and desires. That part. Secondly, when a man approaches this work, he really learns that there is a difference between intimacy and sex. And a lot of times men have never been educated on that or taught that. And it can really open up an entire world for them of more sacred experiences and feeling much more deeply connected to themselves and their partners. That's like one of the biggest feedback I get from my male clients is unearthing this world where eye contact happens in the bedroom, or where slowing down happens in the bedroom, or where climax isn't necessarily the goal, but the journey on the way to the climax is the goal. And it really provides them with just feeling better in their bodies, in their pleasure, in the pleasure that they give and receive. And for men, they are also multi-orgasmic. We hear a lot because of the clitoris that women can have multiple orgasms, but men too can have a lot of really epic sacred experiences with things like rolling pleasure, which is where you are in high pleasure and you go almost toward climax, but you don't climax, and you keep moving through that energy back and forth, just kind of like a wave rolling in the ocean. Also, men can practice where what's called edging, where they can get really close to climax and then not climax and hold that sacred energy within them and keep that potency until they do decide to climax. There's all these really ancient tantric practices that support the man specifically to cultivate and harness their power behind their pleasure. And what it really ends up doing is allowing men to feel back in the saddle, to feel back in their power, to feel back in their masculinity in a lot of ways. And the results that I've had from clients is that it gives them the ability to hold space for themselves and their partners. It gives them the ability to decide that they're going to do things differently, or that they're going to go after a big dream, or they just start choosing differently. Just like we talked about with cultivating the self-trust, and you start navigating life differently. When men find the power in their own pleasure, they start navigating life differently.
That makes sense. I don't know. I'm not a man, but if I were, that would sound pretty appealing to me.
men are really, they really do want to have more of these experiences, but because of community and society and basically porn, they really don't have many tools or education or places or spaces to turn to. And so between Hollywood and porn, we're really just, excuse my language, but fucked in the wrong way, because it shows and demonstrates to us that, like, the narratives that are visible to us are like, oh, I don't want to have sex. Oh, you talked me into it. Oh, now you're banging me and I just came so quickly in 2 minutes and that was like the most fulfilling thing ever. Like, I literally, every time I watch a movie and there's a sex scene, I swear to God, it goes from like making out to like penetration. Also, when is anybody grabbing a condom? Nobody ever grabs a condom in shows or movies. It's the wildest thing. Like, everybody's just out there having raw dog sex, and like and then the woman's coming and then he comes and it was like a 2-minute deal. I'm just like, that's why nobody knows what they're doing, is because every time we're visually shown about these encounters, it's like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. But like, everybody was satisfied. That's not real. It can take me up to an hour to climax from receiving oral at times. And I want to normalize those timelines.
Right, because otherwise therein lies opportunities for more insecurities to immerse. If if we don't normalize stuff like that, then we're all out there alone in the world, feeling alone, like we're unique or we're different or something's wrong with us, even though it's probably just normal. We're actually just normal, but no one speaks about it.
Right. And you know what that feels like? It feels like you're not safe.
Yeah, right. It all comes back to safety. Oh, so I mean, I feel like for me, the biggest takeaway in all this is like, how do I want to sum this up? That if I am aware on some level that I'm lacking safety in my physical being, and I do all the vagus nerve exercises, and I do all the visualizations, and I do all these things, but still there's evidence in my body that there's a lack of feeling safe, that maybe it's time for me to step deeper into a more curious role, and really go within and really seek out, where am I potentially still feeling unsafe in my body? And does it come back to these centers? Does it come back to, is there anything there around my sexuality or my sensuality or my ability to be in intimate connection?
And that will land you a lot of the times on boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries are that final piece, right? Because you can gather all the information, you can get super introspective, you can learn, you can understand, but then you have to choose and build and protect the boundaries that honor the revelations.
Right. And that is a whole topic in its own.
Yeah.
And yeah, with boundaries, I mean, I've definitely had people come on here and talk about like general boundaries, but obviously sexual boundaries in relationships and dating in the bedroom have not been addressed. But like when you're not used to having boundaries or setting any boundary can feel like uncomfortable territory. So it's definitely a learning curve for sure. One that you have to like practice being uncomfortable over and over until it's just second nature.
Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have to do an episode on bedroom and dating boundaries one day.
Oof. Yes, it's definitely its own.
Yeah. That could be a really good one. Because I could already think of a million questions I would ask about that.
Yeah, and boundaries are such a big part of my work. I mean, that's like, with clients, I work on boundaries for months. Because they display and play out in so many different ways that we don't even realize.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, oh yes, it's just, that runs deep.
Yep.
That runs deep. I've admitted on this podcast on a previous episode that I was like 30 something years old and heard this term boundaries on a podcast. And I was like, wait, what are those? Wait, I can have those? Wait. What?
Right.
I didn't know this was a thing. Like, how did it take me until my late 30s to even know boundaries was a thing that I could have?
Which is such a beautiful example of sacred sexuality work, right?
Yeah.
Because when you know your boundaries, if we had more boundaries, like that's like talking about condoms, that's talking about penetration, that's talking about birth control, that's talking about what happens in an accident, like all the things. That's all boundary play.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. And even boundaries with yourself, like knowing when like not being pressured into having sex before you really are ready or want to, just because we're in a culture where everything's about sex nowadays.
Exactly.
You know, everyone's so conditioned to think that you have a physical attraction, you got to go like bang it out like on the first date. And if that doesn't feel like, you know, authentic and real for you, then by all means, like you get to protect that space.
Right. And then when you do that and it didn't feel good, you break your self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then when you break your self-trust, you don't feel safe.
Right.
And that's that cycle.
Yep. Oh, I see this. Okay, that's so good. Wow, there's so many great things that we could go from here. It's a great and a sad and an awesome place all at once to end it.
Yes.
I'd like
Yes.
I'd like to finish off with you sharing where people can connect with you, learn more about you and what you offer, and just so that they can find you out there in the world.
Oh, I love that so much. Yes. So I'm on the gram at Andreja Bourke. It's my name, AndrejaBourke. You can find my website at thetantraqueen.com. And two really exciting things that are coming up are my business partner and I have a live retreat that we do in Greece every October on the island of Crete. And that'll be October 2nd through 8th. And you can find that through my socials. And also at the end of the year, I'll be offering a program called Quenched. And Quenched is the exploration of sacred sexuality. It's learning how to create and cultivate practices with you and your body and your own unique medicine through tantric inspired practices. So that looks like crystal wand, jade egg, breast massage. So it's a really beautiful space and place for women to come together and be in a container with each other and learn some of these ancient tantric modalities.
Very cool. And as you just talked about all that, it made me think of one last question. It's a pretty simple one. Are you ever too old to begin?
No. I have clients, I have clients that are from 19 to 65.
Awesome. So for everyone listening, you're not too old to start now.
Yes. And if you wanted to just like feel my vibe, I also have a podcast called Pleasure Church, but my episodes are just me hopping on for 10 minutes a week, worshiping different parts of your body. So if you don't have the confidence, if you don't have the self-trust, if you don't feel good, you can just turn that on and listen to the words and receive, receive, receive.
I love this so much, Andrea. I'll definitely drop links to all the ways to connect with you, and I'm really excited to check out your podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time, your wisdom, and I really value and appreciate this time we spent today.
Thank you. I feel the same way.
All right, that's a wrap. I hope that you did learn something new today, maybe some new tidbit or takeaway that can support you on your healing journey. Maybe you were inspired by Andrea to lean into your worthiness of pleasure in whatever capacity that looks like for you. Please remember that if you find value in any of the episodes on this podcast, please click subscribe and share your favorite episode with a friend who could also benefit as well. Remember to prioritize your joy this week and have some fun. And until next time, make this week great.